Once again, hello, ladies and gentlemen, hello people, hello wonderful people out there. I'm sure everybody in the world is concerned about what's going on in Ukraine and the war with Russia. There are those of us who are outside the ambit of Russia, as well as being outside of the ambit of Ukraine. Some of us from the non-aligned world. But we are human beings and we all have feelings. First of all, I am anti-war. So the first order of business is to stop the war. And of course, war is actually a failure of diplomacy. Whenever diplomacy fails, the next answer may be war, either cold or the hot war. What is going on in the Ukraine right now is a hot war. Now, when you listen to the rhetoric of Western countries, you will want to think that they will have you think that Putin is this aggressive beast and Zelensky is the vulnerable one, the underdog. And yes, Zelensky is the underdog, Ukraine is the underdog, but there are other complex matters that we need to consider to be able to make sense of the war, the ongoing war. The first of which is geopolitics. It's of course a geopolitical thing. The United States, the rhetoric of the Biden administration in the beginning was that they were there to protect liberal democracy. And of course, once you begin to talk about that, you run into the issue, the problem of interfering in the domestic affairs of a country. And then of course the thing shifted to the real locus of the problem, which is really geopolitical. And that is where we get to the crux of the matter. And this is the crux of balance of power. Everybody understands, most of those who understand, that understood, or who understood, whichever way you want to look at it. Those of us that are familiar with the bipolar system, which actually fell apart with the fall of the Soviet Union, understood that there was some kind of a balance of power which was being pursued across the world. And this balance of power has always been how the world operated, from the concert of Europe during the Napoleonic times to the First World War and to the Second World War and afterwards. There's always been some kind of balance of power. Now, what concerns most people is that this thing is threatening us into a much more terrible and violent stage if, of course, the thing goes nuclear, which everybody hopes it wouldn't. But the issue of balance of power has been neglected throughout, in fact, sidelined throughout this whole conflict. Now, what would it be like to understand that there were spheres of interest? Now, the Western societies have always had their spheres of interest, as well as the Eastern societies. Of course, you can refer to the Monroe Doctrine and the Polk corollaries. Excuse me here. Now, with those imperial, the old Warsaw Pact countries lost most of their allies, so to speak, to the West. And I think one understands why Putin would not like a NATO base at its doorsteps. Americans know what they call NIMBYs. They know, not in my backyard. Putting putting a military base in Ukraine will be in the backyard of the Soviet Union. And the typical American NIMBY will say, hey, not in my backyard. That is the domestic way of understanding it. And the man said, no, hey, if you put this thing in my backyard, you are going to be able to threaten me in such a way that is inestimable. Now, think about what the NIMBYs, international NIMBYs, did during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Cuba is 90 miles away from the United States. And immediately the Soviet Union in those days tried to install missiles and missile bases in Cuba. JFK and his administration went all the way and said no and blockaded Cuba, making sure that the Soviet submarines and ships bringing the equipment actually turned back, and they blinked. And the other one is that they are trying to play a game of chicken. And if you know what happens in a game of chicken, two adversaries sit right opposite one another in a car and start the car, and they head for one another at the highest speeds. The idea is to smack right into each other, bang right into each other and die. Now, as they coming, somebody may actually lose their nerve and swerve out of the way. And the thing goes. So the United States, I'm afraid, together with Britain, will have to find a face-saving device. The rhetoric has been too much, too hot, too problematic. And of course, the rhetoric of Putin about removing Nazis from Kiev and from Ukraine is also equally unattainable. What's important now is that they have to pull back, have a really sustainable ceasefire, and make peace. And I think that the non-aligned countries, those that understand what's going on in the place, can play a fine role. Nigeria can play a very stabilizing role in this conflict, and I hope that they do that, and the whole world can get together and rejoice the day that the armament